Right, we are live now. Yep, and I'm going to share my screen to play the video first. Okay, hi everybody, welcome. So we're going to start our presentation. Yeah. So I'm going to start. Okay. So good afternoon. Welcome everyone. Let's start our conference with our first speaker, Dr. Sujitha Karnad. Yeah, some information about her. So Dr. Sujitha's background is actually engineering, and her doctorate is in connective social structure. She has been in the industry of high tech and IT firms, the track record of building leading world class organizations. Okay. At the same time, she is also an entrepreneur with her brand name now, NOW, which stands for Nurturing Outstanding Women. Right. So in today's talk, yeah, title is going to be Forks in the Road, yeah, FORK, fork, the choices she made, okay. So I'm quoting this from her, yeah. If there were road signs and milestones to guide us, the life traveler, life would be easy. Sometimes we have maps to tell us where we are exactly headed, and most often not. So the path you travel will be full of twists and turns, forcing you to make your own decision. So this talk today, hopefully, will help us, okay, with her woven stories of her life, its purpose, her career, and identity. So please put your hands together for Dr. Sujitha, and any questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Yeah. So hi, doctor. Okay, I'm going to share your screen first.
Yeah.
We can see your screen. Yes. So you can
Hi.
see the screen, and then we can start.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. Very happy to be here today. And let me go into the slide mode when I start this. So, whenever I do a talk, there's always a airplane that decides to create some static in my talk. So forgive me for that little disturbance if you see. So today's talk is titled as The Forks in the Road, and that you can see is me walking down this road. You may ask, where are the forks? But I think I would just want to tell you there are several forks that I did take. And when I made those choices of the forks, those were the kind of consequences I had in my career. But before I start this presentation, let me tell you a little story. You all have heard of Alice's adventures in the Wonderland, for sure. And you will know that when little Alice went walking one day, she comes to a fork in the road, and then she looked up and she saw a Cheshire cat sitting right there grinning at her. So she said, "Which road do I take?" She asked the Cheshire cat. And then the cat said, "Where do you want to go?" She says, "I don't know." Then the cat said, "It doesn't matter which road you take. If you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter which road you take, isn't it?" Fortunately for us, many of us have been guided very well by several people, several instances, and the kind of situations we were in, which shaped up our thoughts. And I would talk a little about what my own personal legend is. I took this from The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho, who said that, if you have a deep desire and a passion to accomplish something with a sense of purpose as well, if you start a journey, then you must do everything you desire for something much greater than just yourself. And I think that stuck with me several decades ago. And I said to myself at several points in this journey, at several forks when I stood at the roads which had them, to say, if I'm going to make a decision, that decision must be aligned to what I want to accomplish or my personal legend. When I look into this pond and you can see the ripples, there is the reflection that you can see. And this is also something I took from The Alchemist, which says the journey is more exciting than the destination. We may carve several milestones and destination points as we go. We may have those desires to reach there. The struggles are plenty and there are some good moments of happiness as well. But when you reach the destination, you will remember one thing: the journey, isn't it? And that is what I did. If I could actually set back the clock, if you see, I really went anti clockwise over there. And as a young child, standing over there, assessing and gauging how high is the step for it to take its first, I could say that this was the long climb I've had so far. And in today's talk, the agenda would be first the talk of my formative years for you to understand what was those key ingredients that made me what I am today. What did I do to hone my skills? Some which were I were born with, some which I acquired. And then I hope to regale you with four stories. The first of them is growing a business from scratch, which is organically managing a joint venture and growing it, which means the inorganic growth that I had to do. And third, scripting a turnaround. And in that part of my journey, I adorned an agile avatar. And the fourth story today would be of a merger and acquisition, of which I was the chief of integration as well. And beyond what happened in that, these are the four stories which I have picked up for talking about today from my career. And in the last phase of my career, of which is now clocking 36 years, I am here writing my legacy in what I call NOW, as you see, and it stands for Nurturing Outstanding Women. This is also a part of my personal legend, and I will talk about it towards the end of this presentation. Diving deep into it, let me talk about my formative years. The first thing I want you to know is that, I grew in the Indian Armed Forces, and the DNA that I had was that of discipline. I survived the 1971 war, that I was a kid of hardly 10, 11 years. But it was my father who influenced me deeply every time we walked through the naval campuses. When when the siren blew for the national anthem to be played and how he would stiffen up, I would look up at him, a tiny little girl, and then I would know that was the first point of time when I looked at what discipline meant. From then, because I was in the armed forces and we would get transferred every few years into different parts of India, I studied in a mix of English and Hindi medium of instruction throughout my schooling. I speak both the languages very fluently, and in addition, I speak about 3 to 4 other Indian languages as well. I loved engineering because it offered the structure, the methodologies, and the quest for understanding different things. But more importantly, I made a bunch of friends who stay with me even today, 40 years and ticking. When I was 45, I registered for a PhD in organizational behavior. And I thought that was a natural progression for me to go through in my career. What I did not expect was the rigor that it would offer. If I think back, there are three things which affected me and which have actually stood me in good stead: the discipline, the structure, and the rigor. These were my formative years and the foundation of my existence, if you will. The first decade of my career was spent in an organization called CDOT. It stood for Center for Development of Telematics. It was established by the government of India in 1984, soon after the or just during the assassination of our Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. And we ushered in the digital switching systems into India. Till then, we had all analog, switching systems for telephones. And I was very proud to be a part of the founding team and developed and designed for several components of the digital switching systems. A first in India, a first for me. Another first I had was being a part of the team which developed a parallel processing system as well. And there was no end to the amount of learning I had in both of these assignments, which lasted for almost a decade. What it saw me transform into was being an R&D engineer into becoming a product manager. I didn't realize what it takes to become a product manager till I came to work and install the parallel processing systems in various labs in India. My second decade, I was bitten by the entrepreneurial bug. And as you can see, this little ladybug over there, as an illustration of it. But what followed a stint in CDOT was 4 years of understanding the nuances of design to manufacture, something which I continued and learned it better in the years that were to follow after CDOT. We continued to be in the domain of telecom and industrial automation. So that was a new kind of a domain that I had to learn, work in very greasy, dirty factories. But that was something which I thoroughly enjoyed because what we designed from scratch was indigenous PLCs, cheaper and highly customizable, which made our customers very happy because they could have help at any point round the clock on their PLCs. But it was the year 1995, and I made a decision that something must be done about the kind of entrepreneurial venture I was doing. So it wasn't growing and scaling to the extent we wanted it to, and therefore we sold it. And then when I looked around, I knew the liberalization of the Indian economy was already underway. Dr. Manmohan Singh, the former Prime Minister of India, was then in 1991 the finance minister, and he liberalized the Indian economy in ways which were then come to stay forever. So it was then time for us to get back into the corporate world, bigger pockets, deeper ones, if you will. More MNCs came in drones. Till then, it was a monopolized, closed economy, only fostering and growing Indian homegrown companies. But when the MNCs walked in, the IBMs and the SAPs and so on, there was so much, they had so many resources to offer, such deep pockets. They said, let's get back from this entrepreneurial stint back into the corporate world. There was so much to learn. The travel bug bit me now, and there were two cities that took my breath away. One was Tel Aviv in Israel, and the other one was Tokyo in Japan. Two cities starting with T, but they were just absolutely amazing cities to visit. What brought me there? I was standing at the cusp of the 21st century. And as I said, I went back to the corporate and I was the head of business development, again in telecom services. I was hired because I could speak the language of telecom and do telecom marketing and services there. So I primarily did technical selling more than actual selling in APAC. But that also meant I had to go to Israel. But will you believe it? If challenges were not enough, the years I started, it was just at the time when the year of Asian crisis happened in 1997, if you all will remember. 95 to 2000 were the years of internet growth. So if there was something falling, there was also something, crewing. While the internet had the dot-com boom and bust, nevertheless, it offered a variety of possibilities for us to work upon. One more skill came into my golf bag, which was the Japanese language, naturally, because I had to deal with the country and the culture and the people, and I really marveled at these two rich cultures, that of Israel and that of Japan. I couldn't but gaze with awe at the engineering and technology prowesses of these two great countries, and I also kept admiring the quality consciousness of the Japanese. Everything put together at the cusp of the 21st century, here I was learning and adding skills to my golf bag. But something was missing, and the rest of the pieces had to be fitted on the assembly line. So very great that I transformed myself, reinvented probably from being just an R&D engineer to a product manager to being in business development, a bit of an entrepreneur, a little successful entrepreneur at that. When everything was just not enough, I needed resources. I felt that I was being crunched for resources, and I knew that was an oyster and for us to go and explore. The fact that I had this opportunity to travel and get exposed to various cultures, that itself told me that there was more for me to see. Very soon, I joined another big Indian organization and I was given the opportunity to build an offshore center right from scratch. And I had to learn the ropes of what I was then transitioning into a business manager, which meant a lot, which meant not only I was responsible for all the software and engineering delivery, I was responsible for HR, finance, sales, operations, and it was my first brush with P&L. It was a new domain as well because from a pure telecom and telecom services kind of background, I had to now learn what was the semiconductor industry all about, what were the trends, what is the front end, back end of the semiconductor industry, where is the basin of this being located, and so on and so forth. And I had to deal with customer relationships, which were very, very intense because the stakes were high. Every relationship translated into billions of dollars on the other side. So therefore, these were far more intense than the customer relationships I had to handle till then. I was also dealing with the chairman's innovative business model because our customer was asked to sign up a deal with us for about 5 years and $75 million. And in the first year, if it were to be a target of $11 million, then it progressively increased to 14 and 15 and so on. And we are talking about 99 to 2002 or so. And that's a time period. And $75 million in those days as an outsourcing contract was pretty large. Well, today we talk in billions, but those days 75 was quite large. What is my personal story? My family was in Bangalore. My teams were in Chennai and the US. And my customers were in San Jose and Tel Aviv. So it was a tale of four cities and three countries that I had to straddle all at the same time. Okay, so what did happen? And you can see that the point that here I'm showing you a few illustrative pictures of the semiconductor equipment that my customer manufactured. I'm showing you that this customer supplied equipment to the semiconductor fabs in the world, all the fabrication plants, which meant Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. And Taiwan continues to be one of the largest producers of semiconductors today. My customer had 85% of the market share in semiconductor equipment, and they needed support on software development, where we were very good at, maintenance, and troubleshooting. On the other hand, my assignment was can you create a 10K clean room? And I'll talk to you a bit about what that means. And ship two machines from Tel Aviv for testing upgrades, patches, etc. What it meant was you can have an ODC, an offshore development center, filled with engineers and fixing patches, developing new software, maintaining existing software, and so on. But you had to test it on a real machine before it was applied worldwide. And therefore, those real machines had to be somehow located in the same place as our offshore center, if you will. And for the first time, I had to ship those two from Israel. And what happened when I started off my journey to Israel? I was the most unwelcome guest. There were three senior leaders in Israel who said that they were too busy to see me. And I had flown all the way from Chennai to Tel Aviv. And just to let you know, that flying into Israel is not easy. You can only fly to Israel via their national carrier El Al Israel, and it's an arduous process because they make sure that you're thoroughly, if I would say, interrogated to see your sense, your intent of purpose for visiting their country. While I passed all those with flying colors, and I said, phew, now I've really reached this place and I can talk to customers. Those customers were saying, we are too busy to actually host you. So the first time when I knocked at a door, he actually said, I'm so sorry, Miss Karnad, but I can't see you. When I went to the knock the second door, and he said, no, I'm busy with a call. And the third person, when I knocked in, and I really sounded like, the three pigs and a wolf, but this time I was the pig knocking the door. And when I did knock the door the third time and it opened a bit, I just pushed myself in. And I said, if I don't make it the third time talking to somebody, this whole trip would be futile. Call it my charm, call it my perseverance, call it my persistence. Their resistance melted, and I got to see their warm, hospitable sides very soon. I convinced them that I was a messenger, harbinger of good luck for them, that their chairman had asked me, Kenneth Levy, to come all the way to Israel and ship these two machines just to help them solve problems that they couldn't otherwise solve just by themselves because they didn't have so many resources to do that, which we could very easily help them with. You can see the food that they served us, and Mediterranean cuisine is one of its kind. As I told you, I love looking at the cultures, the cuisines, and the Mediterranean Sea was so very blue that I can never still forget those images, and they're so very etched in my memory even today. I successfully established the first 10K clean room, and you can know that probably this is the only one in an IT services company that you can have. You can see what this really means is that the normal air, the room air, has got about 35 million particles in 1 cubic foot of air. And what you want to do in a clean room, which is an enclosed space, which is probably found in, pharmaceuticals or semiconductor organized fabs, that's where you find the clean rooms. The particles have to be less than zero point 0.5 microns. And I can tell you that the class 10K clean room is probably one of the lowest in the cleanliness in terms of the ISO 9 kind of certified clean rooms. We needed them because these equipment were very sensitive to dust. The second thing, these equipment were very sensitive was to vibration. Therefore, we had to create a very low vibration clean rooms to house these two machines, which weighed tons of kilograms, to bring them in and use them. And you can see we use all kinds of, apparel to make sure that the dust and our hair or the humidity doesn't get in. And it's a very controlled environment. This is one of the kind. And I think I would, even as I look back, I know the team and I struggled to get there, but the acceleration at the end of it was so worth it. The second story I'm going to talk to you about is running a joint venture, inorganically growing a business. And you can see the view of the financial district in London. And this is the city of London, as it is called, the Gherkin. As you see here, this building shaped like a cucumber or a gherkin. This was being built at the times when I used to frequent the financial district in London, and we had created a joint venture again for an offshore development center with a very large bank, which was equally headquartered between London and Frankfurt. Any guesses for that bank? But just to keep that information out of this talk, I would like to talk about how this meant a whole new opportunity where I just got to do more. And what was the assignment? It was that we had bought the offshore center from the bank, and it was a joint venture between the bank and my organization. And all that the organization told us was, including Sujitha, here is a three-member team to take over the bought out entity. And you can be sure the talent was pretty hostile. Quite like the folks that I initially met at Tel Aviv, these guys were even more hostile because they were thinking that they didn't want to be a part of another organization when they loved their own parent. And that, I think, itself was one of our great wins, because by the end of the 3 years that this joint venture lasted, we were such great friends and continue to be so. My assignment was to manage the joint venture partners, ensure operational efficiency. So you will know that in a joint venture, unlike just an organic growth kind of a setup, there is shared ownership, shared governance, more importantly, shared returns and risks. So one who is running the joint venture has to be extremely careful of how each penny went, because you would have to justify whether it was, kind of slack, it was carelessness, or that you were tightly managing it. And I can assure you that being there day in, day out, I think it was a great job, as told by my bosses eventually. What was the other thing that I had to do apart from managing the joint venture in its entirety was to integrate this ODC with the parent and make it again the flagship account for the company that I worked for. It was again a new domain, wasn't it? Investment banking. So we moved from telecom, moved into semiconductor domain, and now into investment banking. Okay, so what happens? So when you look at this story, what you will see is there were ticking clocks in a very time-bound JV, which is for just 3 years. There were four financial hubs of the world that I was straddling, from New York to London to Frankfurt to Singapore, which meant multiple time zones and a span of 12 hours between Singapore and New York. So I woke up in the morning to Singapore, and I would wind up the day with New York 12 hours later. And this is what I did: software development, engineering, maintenance across various business verticals of the bank, which would mean equity, capital markets, private wealth assessment, trading. And what was it all about was creating application software for all of these verticals, different work cultures, and 3 years to chase a very steep growth target. That is what I did. The adrenaline was fantastic because here what I found was it was breathtaking, heady achievement that I had. You can see those blue, uh, my head was in the clouds, you can see, but I was lonely. I was filled with self doubt quite a lot. And then I would always say, even holding on to what I was doing was so hard. Was I neglecting my home and a growing child? But then I knew one thing: this is what I wanted, the power to make decisions, to steer the business. But I knew with great humility that my success was not because of me alone, because there were so many factors, including my home, my team, my bosses, and everybody that, showered their benign and kind help towards me. There was the finishing line within the next 3 years. We integrated this as well to become a flagship account. So you see, I worked for the same organization one time with semiconductor, created the seed for semiconductor companies to outsource to us, and next created the seed for the banking investment banks to create another vertical for us. So far, so good. So the next assignment saw me take up an agile avatar, and this was a turnaround that I could do, an opportunity I got to take a product based business, a business of more than $1 billion. And at the core of it was a healthcare product. And again, there was a new domain to learn all over again. But the problem here was the software product had gone terribly wrong. terribly wrong. There were 8 million lines of code, a monolithic architecture, 400 live customers, and these customers were hospitals dealing with real time patients. And what were we doing? We were doing the electronic health records, we were doing the healthcare, the hospital information management system, which helped the entire operations of the hospital get automated. So imagine that there is a cardiac surgeon and he has begun an operation on a patient and he's trying to retrieve the electronic health record, and there is a problem. There can be nothing worse than that, because the doctor would then turn back and say, if you don't get this up in less than 3 milliseconds, this is a major problem and I could legally sue you for what you're doing, and so on and so forth. But we had 400 live customers, multiple branches, and you can be sure they were irreplaceable, not replicable bugs, if you will. Worse still, because I often joke that I was hired for this job because I could spell agile the best. But no, even distributed agile was beyond me. And when I look at the HIPAA norms, which essentially means the health insurance, portability and accountability, which says that we can exchange information about the health information with privacy and security. And that is what we were doing. We had to conform to the HIPAA norms as well. And so here was my team in Bangalore. The fatigue had, set in. And the team said, we can't no longer work on this project because every time we do something, and this 8 million lines of code, wherever we touched it, there were so many bugs, and we kept fixing them, and these bugs would never go away. One or the other would show up. How can I really continue working? And the team was feeling so drained, they wanted to leave. There was mounting business losses because there were software maintenance costs which were rising. Investments in new features could never get done because we were pouring all our money into maintaining and fixing bugs in the software. We had 18 branches, if I'm not mistaken, and 3 versions and 400 customers, and it was a nightmare to manage that. And the stack of issues was so alarming, whether it was software, people, business, or customers, and there were very few options left for me. And there I was, trying and struggling to turn this business around. What help did I get? And so I sat back and thought through and said, what should I do now? And here came what I did. And I said that the key to getting this business back on track was to learn, where was this team? Remember that much of the original team had already scattered. So I took a little black book and began to have conversations with the people who were left with them and said, tell me, there's no tacit knowledge. There isn't great documentation on this product. But if I have to fix the bugs and we have to get this product back on track, who can help me? And some of those team members didn't want to reveal the names of the other people because they had said, we really don't want to get back. Not that we don't want to help you, but we are so tired that if we get back into the project, it will be just another one more, phase of draining energy. But then I said there was something missing. So what I did was this. I would go into the cafeteria. I would sit there watching and looking for people who was lunching with whom. And then I knew one thing, that, no matter where the team had scattered, they were bonded by the years that they were there on this project. And therefore, they always lunched together. I used those cues. I learned their social relations. And then I requested for some of the key people to be brought back into the project. And my bosses gave me all the leeway to do that. And will all be well? Of course, it was all well, because in very soon the 18 branches in the software and several versions were just merged, and we were able to just create 3 main releases. Can you believe that? And then the funds started getting released for further development. Let me pause here. One of the things that I learned here was the agile retrospectives. Remember, I told you I could spell agile best, and I quite wasn't sure a little longer after that. But these retrospectives that I did in agile, if you are familiar with the methodologies, they came very handy. The second thing was learning social relations. I knew was key to the way I rescued this project, and therefore, lastly, I took those learnings to fuel my doctoral research in 2007 at the age of 45. The fourth story that I'm going to talk to you about today is the integration of 2 entities. And this was probably the most challenging of the lot because I tried looking for a silver lining and I never could find. You can almost this lady here in the picture, illustrative though she may be, but she's pretty representative of what I felt because such were the days and nights that flowed into each other. And I was called the Chief Transformation Officer because we had to integrate exactly two similar entities. From being a Chief Transformation Officer, I was also given the charge of the business excellence for the companies, which meant not just the software processes, but also that of business processes in the company. And what I really wanted so badly to become the Chief People Officer for the organization. 27 years of just running businesses saw me getting into staff roles, but not just any staff role, strategic, visible, and I think one of the most, I think my when my boss handed over the job to me, my chairman, he said, this is the most punishing job that you anybody can ask for in the industry today. Okay, it was integration of two similar organizations, and I can assure you diversity at the best. Multi countries. I don't know. I think we must have been in at least 95 countries at that time, multiple generations, nationals, aligning all the people, practices, and processes, choosing the best of softwares from both the practices from both the organizations, driving business excellence, strategizing it. I, you now can very well understand that the clouds that you saw that I gazed up, all these jigsaw pieces that I show here, all of them had to be solved. The puzzle had to be solved. I can tell you, looking out from my airplane windows in those days, I knew one thing: the days were long, the weekends were very short, but the success was just around the corner. We integrated it in 4.5 years, the two organizations, more than 100,000 employees, deep domain knowledge, not just in telecom, but in banking, in semiconductors. So you can see the thread. I was there and all then prior to arriving at this point, this fork in the road. And what I must always say is thank my team, the chairman, and the board of our organization for being so kind as I struggled and stumbled and tripped and fell. And there were the triumphs and the trials and tribulations. But I must tell you that it almost makes me orate, isn't it? But those were the kind of moments that I went through. Every time I looked out of the window during the nights, I knew that the view was certainly worth the climb. And this is what I did, and the four stories I had to tell you today. Moving on, I knew one thing, that if I have to find my Aikagai, which is the sense and the purpose of being, as the Japanese say, I had to get back to school. And that was triggered off in 2012 when I had an opportunity in Seoul, Korea, to talk at the Global HR Forum. And at that point, I was wondering, why was I even selected? Because there were thousands of people far more eligible and qualified. I was definitely the CPO at Tech Mahindra, but it didn't mean that there was, that I had achieved everything for me to be invited at a country's forum where they were steering the country's education to the points where they wanted to tell the young children and the education system what they wanted to do for the next few decades. I knew that one could do far more, and if I could get to influence anything at the national level in my own country, this would be the seed that was sown then. I completed my doctorate in 2016, 9 years later from the time I, sort of registered for it, and I co-founded an enterprise in 2017. And this enterprise is called Now. And I knew one thing, that every woman has so many stories to tell. And every time a woman walked up to me and said, thank you for instilling courage and confidence, I knew my ikigai was this. That Lead Now was my ikigai. And I said, the vision for Lead Now is to enrich the life of every woman so that she can choose to be who she wants to be. Making a choice for a woman and having an aspiration, making those choices is so hard for various reasons, be it the culture, the society, or herself. We said, how can we unshackle your dreams for you so that you can achieve your aspirations? And that is what Lead Now is all about. Nurturing outstanding women. And I said, this is a force multiplier because what Lead Now is a self directed discovery portal. You can find, as a woman, when you come onto this portal, you can find solutions through a combination of offerings that we give you, and they are probably all that you can find using either your web or your mobile app to do that. But what it essentially means is that I used all of my talent and skills and my experiences to create this because it was research based. I used the content derived from the research and made it a tech enabled one because I understood what it was to be, understand technology and project and engineering very well, understand the nuances of research, and create products that could make it work. This is essentially a two sided network, which means every woman who joins this can take away something from it and offer something back to it. So, while these are the features, and I'll not go too much into it, all that I want to say is creating this platform has been the joy of my life because it culminates and amalgamates everything that I've learned so far. We tend and we would love to influence anybody from college grads to the employed to restarters to the corporate leaders till we come to the point that we would no longer want to make it any more profit just for profit. We would love to serve the underserved and the unserved. We're starting with our anchor in India, but we would definitely go global. I'd quickly like to end this talk by saying there are two people who influenced me. One is definitely Steve Jobs. I took his words so seriously because, one, you know that you cannot connect the dots looking forward. It's easier to connect them in hindsight. But if you really want to carve the future for yourself and continue writing your personal legend, you have to trust your gut, your karma, your destiny, and connect the dots looking forward as well. Steve Jobs will always stay with me for the mantra that he gave us. The other one is Chittu Krishnamurti because he says, one must understand the whole of life, not just one part. That's why you must read and look at the skies, and you must sing and dance and write poems and suffer. You must suffer and understand because all of this is what life is about. So before you say what questions you have, my last slide says the way ahead that I have is one of peace and purpose. And as I continue in this journey and make new friends, I would be just so very happy to take you along with me and learn from you too. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much for all the experience you shared with us. I have. Okay, so anyone, do you have any questions? Please post your questions on the chat and I will be reading it out. Yeah, I have, Doctor, I have one question. Okay, you told us that you have been doing this for the 27 years. Yeah, so if I'm going to ask you what was the word that you used on yourself, to push on and go on this, like the days when you are down. Is there any mantra or something that you told yourself?
I guess one of the things, yeah, there were many moments of soul low and despair. But I think I would always say there is a tomorrow and the sun would rise and never give up. So I would just, so when I had a bunch of problems and, I would be just zoomed out, I would say the best thing to do is to just go to sleep and then get up next morning and I was raring to go because I knew that I was not going to give up anyway. So is that the
Wow.
answer to the
Okay.
question?
Yeah, it does. Okay, so that's another question. Right. Now, do you think like you shared with us about you being traveling with your dad, showing you stuff and all that. So do you think empowering women, putting women into like let's say semiconductor areas, all that, should start from home, from their parents, giving women the strength to say, go on, let's try something new.
I agree with
What do
you.
you think?
Yes, it must start from home because that's the best place to learn. So many of the reasons that when I do so I've the last few years and because of Leadner, I do a lot of gender research, and I think some of those statements that your parents or your relatives or friends who make while you're growing up actually are some of your most limiting factors if they are a little critical. For example,
Mm.
there are parents who, without really meaning to, tell a child that you're not good at dance. It is your sister who's good at dance, and you're good at math. So they sort of put those things into your
Yeah.
head, and you begin to start living to those expectations. The one way to deal with it is to say, go ahead and experiment and discover everything that you want to do, and stay with the few that you think is worth your while. And that is what I think every one of us must do. We can't get limited by some of those, statements which sort of have been deep down buried in our subconscious. So they do hope that all of us will not make those statements to our children.
All right. I have another question. How did you get your motivation during times of adversity? This is from someone called Preeti Subra.
How did I get my motivation? I
Yeah,
think
motivation during times of adversity.
many a time I would look to a mentor or a coach or a friend. I would look at those who would, help me without a judgment. And I think those helped me a lot. Those people helped me a lot. So in the year 2002, I remember having getting coaching for the first time. And after that, I've never looked back. So every time I've had an issue or I was in a new role, I would ensure that I could always reach back to this coach and ask him for help. And I also, in turn, became a coach because I knew it was always the payback that mattered, the giving and the taking. So I became a
Mm.
coach, I think, in 2005, certified. So for the last 16 years, I've been an executive coach as well. Yeah. So
Okay.
coaching was one. Going and looking at mentors, my father, who was a role model, my husband, who always supported me. So in times of adversity, these were the people who would tell me that how can you give up? You're not the kind. And that itself would just make me okay. Or probably challenge me, you can't do it, and I just go and do it. I don't know. Any of those
Okay.
worked with me.
Right. Okay, then I have another question, Doctor. This is from Miss Tam. How do you manage work and family life?
I think it was so. There are this always this mantra which stayed with me. There are two things that you have to always look at. One, if you are completely aware of what your value systems are, then you would know how to adjust the priorities at every phase of your life. So, for example, when I was doing the most difficult job of integration, that was when my father-in-law fell very ill, and he needed a lot of support, and I had to support my spouse as well in managing his father and the family, and there was a lot of emotion around this as well. I think the value system there was you have to look after your elders. So that was what was with me. So I said, I must do that. So the priority automatically got adjusted. So he was priority. If anything to do with my father in law came up, I would go and, attend to it immediately. And then the reprioritization, which is of my work, would come only next or later. So the first thing that I would like to say is sometimes we have to give up our dreams. We may have to compromise, which means that the priorities of our dreams are much lower than the priorities which we set. So that is determined by your value system. So your values determine your priorities, honestly. And that's how I managed it. And I had no regrets because if I had to compromise something and not be the best at work, and I had to compromise because I had to look after an elderly person, I gladly did it because I knew that is what I had to do. Otherwise, I couldn't have lived with myself. So you
Okay, I
juggle.
have yeah, I have one more question. So could you advise us how women from the same office or same organization, yeah, should support each other? And it's like how do we build this career, this culture?
That's such a
For
wonderful
example, like
question.
women in the same workplace, yeah. So how do we motivate or empower another woman or help her, to succeed her goal? And how do we bring in a culture into an organization which is like maybe filled with men? How do we bring the women, to support them or support our colleagues and stuff like that? because women empowerment.
Yeah, and I think so. Here are what many organizations try to do, and they are not so very, I would say they could improve a lot. But what they try to do is um, create women only networks. We also create forums where women can get together. And it need not be just women, it could be men and women who can get into these forums. So, networking is
Okay.
key. And the platforms and forums you create them could be anything. Just a brown bag lunch. It could be that you're, having team outings or you have common meetings of with agendas which are of interest to both parties. But the key thing for every woman is to reach out to other women as well, to give
Okay.
back, to also, mentor them. And so, we can always ask the organizations to create formal mentoring processes and stuff like that. But it works and it doesn't. Because,
Okay.
what we
Yeah.
have to do is find time to get mentored and mentor others. Yeah, only then it'll work. Yeah,
All
does that
right.
work for you?
Yeah, I think so. To have something built in the culture, in the staff, and to
Yeah,
start something or just be quiet. Like you said, reach out, have forums, discuss. Network. I guess
yeah,
women, we have a tendency to just keep quiet when we feel something, or we don't, we're not brave enough. So, but that would be good. Having a open relationship. With everyone, talking and mentoring. And you said, I like the part that you used, giving back. Don't just accept but give back. Yeah, that's nice. That's very nice. Okay,
true, true.
doctor, that's all of the questions that I'm
Wonderful.
seeing. Yeah, there's just one last one. It's about. Okay, let me read this out for you. What was your aspiring motivation to complete your PhD? And also, how do you do better in things that you are not good at?
Okay, so
That would be
what
the
was
last
my
question.
motive?
Okay, that's a long
Yes,
question.
okay. Two parts to it. So
Yeah.
the PhD was very hard, but it was the quest for understanding and making sense of what was going on. And I did it quite late in my life. I mean, if that is anything, because I think I took quite a few years to do that. In between, I had shelved it. So I started it in 2007. And by the time I went, it was to 2010, I shelved it because I was already involved in the integration of the two companies that I was talking to you about. And therefore, I could
Yeah.
only pick it up after 2013. What made me really go was this quest for knowledge. I really wanted to figure out so many things. And I can assure you that the stuff I learned during the PhD program got all my answers in a row. So I was very happy. The motivation was only to learn and to understand, make sense. So that is where it it was. And what is the second part of the question, Vinu?
Um, and how do you do better in things that you are not good at?
Oh, I don't do them anymore. I get other people to help me out with it
Okay.
because I only know that you can go from good to great, but you can never go from not good to good. So that's not possible. So you would have read the Good to Great story by Collins. So I wouldn't do that. I would always ask somebody else who was better at it to do it. Yeah. And I know that I'm
Oh,
not one alone. Yeah. I always augment and complement people with complementary skills with me.
right. Okay, doctor. I think you have answered
Thank
us a lot
you.
of questions. We've been online for an hour now. So thank you so much. Thank you for sharing with us this your whole experience and all that, the journey, the setbacks and all that. I'm definitely we would have learned something from it. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. The next session
Thank you.
will be on later. And thank you, doctor. And
Thank you
bye.
very
Bye,
much.
doctor.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Yeah. Take care.